Fine with me.
Okay. Okay, so a couple of housekeeping items, and then I want to read you about Mirala because she's incredibly impressive. I want to point out again what you got in your email, which is that the March meeting is going to open to anybody you want to invite. We would love to have members of your congregation attend, friends, anybody who might be interested. Pam's got us set up to accept an infinite number of people. And I'm hoping that, you know, we have 100 or more people attend. So please do invite anybody who you think might be interested in that subject. And it's fine with Rabbi Bernstein also. So make it big. Also, the May meeting, which was going to be a continuation of sustainability in power. We've decided instead to turn that into a brainstorming meeting for the next year's roundtable. So come with ideas in May. Okay, let me introduce Dr. Marilyn Goldsmith. She's co-chairperson of the Jewish Earth Alliance, a national grassroots coalition raising a moral voice on climate change to the US Congress. Marilyn now lives in Washington. Marilyn directed Hazon's Jewish Greening Fellowship, a program funded by UJ Federation of New York that mobilized 55 synagogues, JCCs, day schools, and social service organizations to respond to climate change. She went to the UN Summit on Climate Change in Copenhagen, representing 22 American Jewish organizations. She was the leading Jewish organizer for the People's Climate Marches in New York and in Washington. Mirala has shared Jewish environmental teachings in Kathmandu, in the Salisbury Cathedral, at the Parliament of World Nations, and in other interfaith settings. She was first inspired to get involved in environmental issues by a solar composting toilet that she encountered in Yosemite National Park. She went on to earn a PhD in environmental psychology. She has come a long way from there to speak to us today about how we can mobilize our Jewish communities to advocate for the world we want. And with that, and I love the story about the toilet, I introduce Marilyn Goldsmith, a friend and a brilliant leader. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marty. It's really an honor to be with all of you here. And let me just get my PowerPoint up here. I know there's a way to have it all set up before you start, but I haven't figured that out yet. Let's see. Okay, so as mentioned afore, I'm now the co-chair of Jewish Earth Alliance, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about advocacy. So to start out, this is me. A couple of summers ago, I had the incredible pleasure and honor of going on a trip with Green Faith, the interfaith environmental organization, to see the first offshore wind farm in the United States, which is the Block Island Wind Farm off of Rhode Island. Now, I can't see all of you now, but if anybody else has been there, please put it in the chat so we can compare notes. This was just an incredible trip. We took a fast ferry out to see the 5 turbines there. And the story is that Block Island has always gotten its electricity from a diesel-powered power plant that's on the main street. So you get off the ferry and this beautiful, like, holiday island, and you see, hear, and smell, you know, this little power plant. So they were very motivated to go forward and approve this wind farm that powers the island, as well as some people on the mainland. And we were accompanied on the trip by someone from the National Wildlife Federation who told us all about the efforts that they had made to protect wildlife during the construction, which was a big concern of a lot of the people on the boat. And we were also accompanied by the head of the local steelworkers union. And that was really exciting because he told us all about how proud his men were to be trained to erect these turbines and to work on this project and build some of the things that were connected to it. And he also told us that they built some of the appurtenances, that's like the platforms and the ladders and things that get attached to the platform. And they sent those things down to Louisiana, where a company that usually builds oil drilling platforms assembled everything. So it's really, you know, sort of like what we're always talking about. What can be with the green economy and the jobs and, just like where we're going. And then when we got out to the site, we all stood on the deck and all the different faiths, shared something. So, there was a poem, prayer from the Catholics and a poem from the humanists and, various different groups. And then Rabbi Joel Abraham from New Jersey stood up and he spoke about the word ruach, which means wind, but it also means the breath of life. And he spoke about how the wind that can give us life, by the way, that's also the word for spirit, can give us spirit and life, can also provide us with clean, safe, healthy energy that can solve the climate crisis and put us on a path to the kind of future that we all want. Well, it was a very inspiring moment for me. And I realized at that point that I really wanted to do something more to help to mobilize Jews to be involved in this, quest to build that sustainable path. So I know I'm speaking to some real experts here. So I hope you'll all contribute your ideas as we go along. But basically, we can all do things individually to address the climate crisis. We can do things as a community. And I like to say that what we can do individually is a drop in the bucket, but if we do it as a community, we can fill the bucket. So a lot of the actions that we take as individuals, if we just do them in our Jewish communities, can have a great, much more and greater impact. But then we also know that we really have to deal with the systemic issues. So just an example is this is actually my congregation. So since I moved down to Washington, I belong to a Dot Shalom Reconstructionist congregation in Bethesda. And our climate action team took on this project of getting members of our congregation to subscribe to buy their power from the first community solar field in Maryland. And this is the dedication, obviously, where we said the blessing for the sun. But we were really, really excited. We got about, I think it's gone up by now, but somewhere over 70 families to subscribe to this field. And since it was the first field in Maryland, we really felt we made a big contribution because it was proof of concept that community solar could work in our state. Now, as we go along, it would be nice if you could put in the chat some of the things that you're doing with your congregation. I know this is an ongoing group, so you've probably shared a lot of those things, but I would like to know what you're doing. So put in the chat some of the things that you're doing in your communities or your organizations or your congregations to address on the individual, community, or systemic level climate change. And we'll come back to that in a minute. So what I know is that a lot of Jewish organizations and especially congregations are a little bit shy about moving on from these kind of personal actions or maybe community actions at the facility level to get involved in addressing the systemic issues, which do require getting involved in politics and advocacy. So we had that issue at my congregation. And we decided that, we kind of got motivated from the community solar because we realized that we couldn't have done that community solar project and getting people to sign up if it weren't for that new law that was passed in Maryland allowing for community solar. So we realized we kind of needed to up our game. And we decided that we would join with one of the local environmental organizations and try to get our congregation to be involved in the state level environmental advocacy lobby night. So go to Annapolis and actually lobby for legislation. But we knew that our congregation was not ready for that. So we kind of worked backwards and we thought of ways to educate the congregation. So the first thing we did is have a legislative briefing, and we invited some of our local state level representatives to speak to our congregation. And just in case anyone's feeling intimidated about that, I just want to let you know that we decided to hold the event in someone's home rather than in the synagogue, because we knew that we could fill a room in someone's home and it would be very exciting. Whereas we didn't know if we could fill a big auditorium. So we decided to start small, and actually it was very successful. And this year we actually had this is the group that went to Annapolis to lobby. And this year we had our second annual legislative briefing. Of course, it was on Zoom. So Marty said that I should be sure to just go over the basics of the fact that nonprofit organizations, including congregations, can get involved in advocacy and lobbying. A lot of people are not aware of that fact. But if you have any, yes, the answer is definitely yes, you can. It can't be your main activity, but of course it won't be for any of you. And the real limitation is that you can't get involved in political campaigns, so election campaigns. But if you have questions about that, or anyone in your community does, on our website, the Jewish Earth Alliance website, there's a link to this source book, Speak Truth to Power, a guide for congregations taking public policy positions, which is put out by the URJ, which goes into all the details about that. So you don't have to explain it. Tell them to go right to the source. Okay, so now I'm going to get into talk. Let's see. Hey, I can't see the chat while I'm talking to you with my PowerPoint. Are there any questions in there or any suggestions? Marty, why don't you be my my chat reader?
Okay, I did see one question pass me right at the beginning about the wind turbines. Were any birds hurt? What's the effect on the bird population?
Thank you very much for asking that. So that's why I mentioned that we had someone with the National Wildlife Federation with us, and she explained that no, basically birds are not a major issue. They site, it has to do with where they site the turbines, and if they site them far enough offshore, they really have no impact on the birds. She also pointed out that climate change is killing a lot more birds than any wind turbines can. And actually, do you know what the main threat to birds is? It's cats, domestic cats. So
Wow.
it's not really the most pertinent, but that's the answer to that question. Okay.
Okay,
So
there are a lot of comments for you here. No more questions, but you had asked for people to put in what they're doing, and you'll read a lot of that. There are a lot.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll come back to that. So anyway, so I told you that I was inspired to figure out how we could do more to mobilize the Jewish community. And when I was in New York, I thought, you know, Washington is very far away. But then there I found myself in Washington and realized Congress is right down the street. What could we do to help to connect Jews all around the country with what's going on in Congress and to raise our voices? So after, you know, finding some more cool Jewish activists here, we launched the Jewish Earth Alliance. And our goal is really to help Jewish communities all around the country connect with their own members of Congress and be part of this collective Jewish voice on climate change to the Congress and, you know, to get legislation passed. This is a little bit out of date. We've actually now delivered even more letters than this, but I like to show this picture because it kind of shows how we actually can have an impact and make a difference. Some of you probably recognize in the middle, that's Congressman Elliot Engel, the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. So what happened is me and my friend Dee Herman, we went to one of the Fridays for the Future rallies that, with the young people on the lawn of the Capitol. And we saw this globe there that someone had set up for photo ops. So we went over there to get our picture taken. And there was a photographer there and he said, "Oh, please stand next to the congressman." So we turned around and we looked, and sure enough, there's a congressman. And the amazing thing was, I actually recognized that it was Elliot Engel, which, believe me, a year ago or a year and a half ago, I never would have recognized him. But we have a group that's working with us in Riverdale, and they've been writing to their member of Congress, Elliot Engel, every month about climate change. And we had been delivering the letters to his office. And although we had not met directly with him, we had met with his staffer, Harry Semerjian. So amazingly, I knew what to ask Mr. Engel. And I looked at him and I thought, well, this is my chance. I looked at Mr. Engel and I said, we are advocating for the 100% clean energy bill. And we need you to co-sponsor it. And I have to say, it wasn't that easy. He didn't say yes right there. But he kind of funked around and said, well, you know, I'll think about it and, you know, be in touch with Harry. So we went home. We were in touch with Harry. We were in touch with the group in Riverdale. And they wrote to Harry, too. And they wrote to Mr. Engel again and said, you know, we understand you had this conversation. We need you to co-sponsor this bill. And what do you know? A few days later, we got a note from Harry saying Mr. Engel is going to co-sponsor the bill, which is to say that if you get involved on a regular basis and you have a relationship, you can really make a difference. Now, one of the questions that often comes up, people ask us is, can we really make a difference as Jews because we're so small? And actually, we were inspired to start this project by the Unitarians because they had a similar project. My friend Lavona, who started it, she said that members of her Unitarian congregation always said, well, what difference can we make? We're so small. And she would tell them, well, the Quakers, the Friends, make a big difference. Everyone knows they're at the forefront of a lot of advocacy and a lot of issues, and they're even smaller than we are. So believe it or not, there are only 80,000 Quakers in the United States and 200,000 Unitarians. And they're very active. And we are 6 million to 9 million Jews, depending how you count. So yes, we really can make a difference if we raise our voice. And Jewish Earth Alliance, we've already have groups that are working with us in all the states that are green there. We really need some in the middle there. So if you have friends like in Kansas or Oklahoma or Arkansas, please put us in touch with them. But really, we need our legislators from all states. I know sometimes people ask me, well, what about if we're in a state with a Democratic delegation or representatives who already are active on climate change? We know that none of them are doing enough because they're not passing the legislation that we need. We need those people to really lead the way and champion the legislation. So yes, the answer is we need people in every single state. So the idea of Jewish Earth Alliance is that we make it easy for Jewish communities to be involved. And it's really structured in a way that's comfortable for Jewish organizations and especially congregations, because we know that a lot of congregations don't really want to sign on to anything, or, if you want to be involved in advocacy, you have to go to the board, to sign off on any specific legislation. So what we do is we give you the tools to mobilize your community as individuals. These are the resources that we provide: speakers, a monthly action alert, which I'm going to show you one of those. We have a monthly call for Jewish inspiration, learning more about what's going on in Congress, and networking and sharing, and everybody's welcome to come and participate in that. We can help you arrange meetings with your members of Congress. And I'm very excited that Bob is with us now, because I know he's arranging a meeting for people in Westchester with your new member of Congress, and we've been trying to help with that. And we also sometimes bring Jewish organizations together if we have, there's an issue that we can all raise our voices together on. So this is just one of our action alerts. And I just kept this one, even though Tu B'Shvat is passed, just to give you the idea that we do try to tie some of the issues that we're working on together with the Jewish calendar, or what's going on in our community. So we had Tu B'Shvat, so we were working on the roadless area rule, which is to protect the Tongass National Forest, which is America's Amazon. And this is our action alert for this month, which is on passing legislation to reach 100% electric vehicles, basically, which is a really key. The transportation sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. So it's a really important, issue to work on. What I want to tell you about that. Something else. Okay. And here you can, if you go to our website, jewishearthalliance.org, you can find all these resources. Actually, if you want to work on some other issues, and the one we're working on, we have one that we do each month. A lot of these are still very relevant. So you can find a lot of good background information. And also for every action alert, we have a Jewish perspective. So if you want to have Jewish learning when your group gets together, that's also a resource. So just a couple weeks ago, we led a collaboration of many Jewish environmental organizations on a webinar looking at what's coming up in the 117th Congress. And I just want to say that this is a really crucial time to get involved. As you all know, this is the first time we have a president who's been elected on a platform of taking action on climate change. On January 27th, he signed an executive order taking quite a few important actions to address climate change, and basically to sort of mobilize a whole of government approach on climate change. We also had some good news from Congress right before the end of the last session, as part of the COVID bill and the budget bill, the big package that they passed, there were some climate actions that were included, including phasing out of HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, which are super pollutants in the atmosphere. So we're actually seeing some momentum now. But as you all know, we've wasted a lot of time. And this is really the moment when we need Congress, as well as the administration, to take action. And it's I think it's a really positive and hopeful time, and a great time to engage people in advocacy. I know we're seeing a real surge in interest. And the progress that's been made so far is all because we have built a strong climate movement, and more people are getting involved. If it weren't for that pressure, we wouldn't have seen that being an issue in the campaign, and we would not see Congress taking any action. We wouldn't see President Biden taking action. So we need to keep that up. We need to keep growing our movement. And, you know, we don't know when the tipping point is going to come, but we know that for every big change that's happened in this country, like abolition of slavery, the suffrage, women's suffrage, the civil rights movement, LGBTQ rights, they all were only happened because people really got involved. And there's a tipping point coming, and we need to be part of that and ready for it. So I just want to encourage you to be strong, chazak ve'amatz, take some risks, and think about how you can get your community involved. And just a few final, ideas of things you can do. First of all, of course, sign up to receive our information. Contact Bob. Maybe he can put some information, maybe put your contact information, Bob, in the chat. He's getting a group mobilized in Westchester. Invite a speaker to your community. We'd be happy to help with that. And commit to contact your members of Congress on a regular basis. And we recommend using our tools. You can also call, obviously, and think about how you can get your community involved. So now I will stop and let's see, take some questions or thoughts. I know we have a lot of experts here, so please ask away or tell me what else is going on in Westchester.
Yeah, there's a lot in the chat, so take a look about what's going on in Westchester, but not questions. Yeah, Bob Schloss. I've been involved a bit with Diana, and will be more. So that might be something that we as a group might want to hook into as Diana starts new actions. I know there have been some meetings with the new representatives. Everything's a little more difficult and also a little easier by Zoom. I don't know if it's a plus or minus, but they seem to me to be interested in, is particularly the newly elected. By the way, Elliot Engel lost, Mirala.
Yes, I know. I am. I'm sorry I didn't say that, but I know.
So they do seem interested, and perhaps it's far easier for them to meet with constituent groups by Zoom. So that would be something we might want to set up as the Westchester Jewish, whatever, greening roundtable.
Thank everybody for putting some of the things that you're doing in the chat. And when you're doing, for example, Judy, hi Judy. I see that you're in the process of joining Community Solar. We found that was like so energizing for our congregation. And I think one of the things, we know from the research is once people take a personal action, they're more willing to get involved in advocacy. So it's kind of, I sort of encourage you to strike while the iron is hot, and, follow that up with the idea of like, once people feel like authentic, they've done something, they'll be more willing to participate in that. Somebody has about, let's see, composting I saw. Oh, is it, somebody said something about composting.
Oh, Pam is saying that Judah and Bob both have their hands raised to ask a question. So Judah, why don't you go ahead?
Question is about the 117th Congress. I mean, I don't know how these things work. Can you explain where they're at and when they're going to get to whatever they're going to get to and how that works, whatever?
Okay, well, I wish I had a crystal ball and could tell you exactly what's going to happen. One of the frustrations of being an advocate is you have to keep on top of what's happening, but I'll tell you what we're hearing now. By the way, that's a very Washington thing when you say what we're hearing is where they all talk. Well, today the House passed the rules for the reconciliation bill. You're all probably hearing about reconciliation, and I'm sure some people here know more about it than I do, but reconciliation is basically a budget bill. So anything that has budget implications can be sort of jammed into that bill. What we heard today, the meeting, I participated in a meeting of all the faith advocates on the Hill. So these are representatives of like the Catholics, the Lutherans, all the different churches, as well as the Religious Action Center, for example, of the Reform Movement. That's the meeting that I was at today. And they said that they passed those rules and nothing about climate change, almost nothing that we've been lobbying for was included in that. So that's not a very good sign. However, what we're hearing is that after they pass this bill, which could possibly be mid-March, there's going to be another bill, which is going to be an infrastructure bill. Remember how President Trump was always going to have infrastructure week and never got around to it? Well, they're supposed to get around to it now. And in that bill, a lot of things that have to do with climate change can be included. As you know, President Biden's been talking about climate is jobs. So there's a lot of things that can go in there on transportation and energy. They want to put in there like improving the grid, building out electric charging network, and so on. There's a long list, as well as some really important environmental justice provisions. So it's looking like that would, that's going to be one of the best chances in the 117th Congress to get some of the things that we've been advocating for actually passed. Of course, a lot of the discussion was about getting those extra 10 votes in the Senate. So that's something to think about. We need to work with our communities all across the country to really get those extra votes. Was that helpful, Judah?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, Bob, you had a question? Bob Schloss?
Yeah, this is like more of a perspective question, especially because a lot of us in our synagogues are going to be sharing this with teenagers and young people in the religious school. So is it better to sort of say, we're doing like our grandparents did when they organized to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine? It took a number of decades. It took international agreements. We had to raise money. We had to lobby foreign ministers, but it happened. And so give the perspective, you might be working on these issues for the rest of your life, little 8-year-old. Or is it better to say, here are concrete things where with enough personal will, business will, government will, you'll see substantial changes in as little as 15 years and probably major changes in as little as 29 years. So what do you know about the way to communicate about this that's not discouraging, but also realistic? That's my question.
That's a really great question, and I'm glad you asked it. I'm an environmental psychologist, so I follow the research on this stuff. And the big takeaway is people need hope. People are more motivated by the positive than by the negative. When we started out in this field, we all thought we had to scare people with what's going to happen with climate change. Well, we now know that really doesn't work. What motivates people is hope. But I just have to tell you a story since you asked about the young people in your synagogue. A couple of years ago, there's a program at the Jewish Theological Seminary where teenagers can come for 2 weeks during the summer and do social justice. They learn about social justice and they do volunteering. So I was asked to help them to organize an environmental justice tour, and I gave them some names, and told them who to reach out to, but it just didn't work out, for scheduling reasons. So they said, please, could you come give the environmental justice tour? So I worked out a route, meeting them at the Jewish Theological Theological Seminary and walking around Harlem. We visited the bus depots, you know, and the trash transfer station and so on and so forth. And then we ended up on the roof of the North River water treatment plant, which, as many of you probably know, was really one of the, you know, key environmental justice battles that kicked off the whole movement. You know, was a sewage treatment plant that should have been built in Lower Manhattan, but instead it was built in Harlem. And as part of the compensation for the community, they put a park on top. So we sat up there and ate our lunch, and, you know, and I talked about the Hudson River. And I told them about how in the 60s, you know, people got together, the Fishermen's Association, you know, and then they founded Riverkeeper and Pete Seeger, and how the river was very, very polluted. But today it's much, much cleaner, clean enough that, you know, you wouldn't want to swim in it every day, but you can swim in it. And at the end of the program, I asked these teenagers, what did they learn from this day, you know, in the tour? And what they all said really surprised me. They said, we learned that things could get better. The story about the Hudson River was what they took away, because they said, people never tell us that things can get better. We're always hearing about all the problems. So yes, and yes, definitely tell them about the social movements of the past that have succeeded, and that it's going to take time and it's going to take persistence. But you can also talk about the wins that we've already had. You know, we've already had, I mean, right now I'm writing my action alert for this month, and it's about the Kigali Amendment to reduce phase out the use of HFCs globally. But the Montreal Protocol that phased out the CFCs, which were the precursors, you know, that was a huge success. The countries of the world got together and they phased these out. Now, there were unintended consequences. There's more problems. Yes, yes, yes. But it was a huge success. And, you know, look at what's happening with closing coal plants. Look at the fact that they're now expecting electric cars really to become, you know, to reach a tipping point within a year or two. I mean, we didn't even have electric cars before. So anyway, talk about the positives and the wins.
Okay, Ellen Weininger asked, are there any upcoming Jewish Earth Alliance Zoom events that we can link to and energize groups together, similar to last month's event?
What a great question. Hi, Ellen. Thank you for everything you're doing. Well, we have a monthly meeting, and I have to say it's always on the third Tuesday of the month. And I have to say we get really great speakers. So this month, I know we're supposed to have, I'm hoping that he'll actually make it, but we're supposed to have a staffer of Congressman DeFazio, who's the lead on the transportation and the infrastructure bill. And his staffer is supposed to speak to us about what's going on with that. So that'll be very, very timely, and you can definitely link to that. We also record the meetings, and I had never thought of this before, but someone just said to me that what they're going to do is they're going to show, usually the speaker speaks for like 15 minutes. You know, we have some, you know, we do some introductions, we do some Jewish learning, blah, blah, blah. So they're going to show the speaker for their own meeting, you know, as the inspiration. And yeah, so does that answer the question, Ellen? Yay. Please join us sometime. It's fun.
Okay, those are all the questions in chat. There's a lot for you to look at, Mirala, for what's been going on. Oh, wait, here came a new question. What are the best practices to get more members to participate in community solar? Is there a way to organize multiple temples?
Yeah. Those are really, I think, two different questions. So what's the best way to get people to participate in general? So we just talked about one thing. Give them a positive vision of the future and what they can do together. The second thing is, it's all about the people. It's the social, it's what we call in psychology, social norms. People follow people. So try to organize your campaign and your outreach to really highlight what people in the community are already doing. And one of my best real simple tips, I can give you some references so you can learn more about this, but if one of my real simple tips is take a lot of pictures with people in them doing the right thing. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So write just a few words and put your pictures in the newsletter, you know, and send them around so that people see other people taking action. That is what really moves people to do things.
I'd like to add something to that. You made me remember something from years ago. Mirla was the founder of the Jewish Climate Action Network in New York, and I later joined the steering committee there. And my background is in public relations. And as soon as I joined, I said, we need signs. We need a banner and signs that say Jewish Climate Action Network New York with a logo. So we made a whole bunch of signs, and what were there 20 people maybe who were meeting in Ace's living room, but after that, wherever this group went, either up to Albany or marching in a march, whatever, they were all carrying signs and taking pictures. And one picture was with a big banner on the Brooklyn Bridge. The pictures and the visual even being there with identification of that this was a Jewish group, because I think that made an impact, and a climate action network really made a difference. It certainly made a difference in Albany and the people that you got to see. So I second that. People and pictures.
Yeah. And make it fun, you know? I mean, we are, like Bob said, we're in it for the long haul. So people have to enjoy. I always say activism should be fun. Being with you all tonight is really fun for me. There's some great points in here. So Bob asked about, are we working with any youth groups? I actually just spoke with a student at Hillel this afternoon who was really excited about what we're doing. Our tools are like available for anyone to use. And actually there was a picture in there. I didn't want to take too long talking about it, but there was a photo in there. One of our, one synagogue that's been working with us, there's kids, and they had the kids in the Hebrew school write letters about the Tongass National Forest for Tu B'Shvat. And the kids all wrote their letters and they decorated them with pictures, and they, we delivered them to their member of Congress, their House representative in the House. And she was so tickled by it that she actually staged the photo in the corner. There was a photo there. She staged a photo with all their pictures so she could send it back to them and encourage the kids to be involved. You know, it is civics, you know, like we need to grow them up to feel comfortable, you know, speaking up and being involved. So that was really encouraging. We work really closely, Bob, with Chazon, and, you know, have spoken a couple of times to the Youth Jewish Climate Activist Program, but you know, I think it's great to connect young people with other young people. Let's just face it, you know, that's the best thing. Someone asked about Rabbi Shoshana. I see you asked about the Shemitah year. What a great idea!
I keep talking about it wherever I go. Like, Shemitah's coming. What are we gonna do? And so at some point, my seeds will bear fruit. Maybe here. But every 7 years, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, in the Torah, it tells us that the land should rest on the 7th year, and 5782 is a Shemitah year. So we should be thinking about it and planning it and getting ready to launch it.
I encourage you to do that. The last Shemitah year was a really huge turning point for me in terms of my spiritual relationship to this whole issue. And I learned so much, you know, there's so much to know about Shemitah, and it's so relevant to what's going on now. And there are because there's so much went on during the last Shemitah year, there's a lot of resources. Chazon has a great resource book that you can check out. I personally created a Shemitah Seder that you can use for a program. I have a lot of program
Awesome. Send it. I would love to see it.
Yeah, I have a lot of program ideas for Shemitah. It's also a great time to connect with Israeli environmentalists. So that's another thing that you can bring to your community. So I think, doing something together as a community is a fantastic idea. I encourage you to. Definitely.
So Judy Zinger has a question, but before we leave the Shemitah year, what you made me think of was when we meet in May, maybe that's something that the whole roundtable, the county, the Jews of Westchester County together could create something. We'll talk about that in May.
And I'll talk to the clergy in Westchester.
Yeah.
I'll start organizing them.
That's great. It would be so wonderful to do something as a whole county together, the Jewish community of Westchester. That would be great.
Yep.
I can't help myself. One thing I would suggest is start soon learning about Shemitah, because there's so much, you know, there's the surface part of it, you know, But if you really dive into it, one of the most amazing things for me was at the time I was working at Chazon, as Marty mentioned, and Rabbi Ari Hart came to Chazon and gave us a 6-week course on Shemitah, and we studied text, from all different periods and everything. And it really, really enriched what we did. So I'm sure as a rabbi, you love hearing.
I'd be happy
Learning is helpful.
to learn and then teach, like to bring all this together. And
That's a
Pamela,
great
maybe-
idea. We really
Pam,
should put
maybe
this
I can
together.
do this through the UJA, offer a class on Shemitah, like a 6-week thing after I finish the one that we're doing now with these groups. So I'll follow up with the UJA, see if maybe
That's
I can do it.
great.
Great idea.
Judy Zinger, you have a question.
Well, it's just a comment on Shemitah. We had a belated Tu B'Shvat event Sunday. We always have it at Bet Am Shalom. We have it like 10 days after or something. But one of the things we introduced was a gardening project, and people were really enthusiastic. Climate change, climate activism, food scraps, not so much. But gardening really got a lot of interest, and people are committed to their gardens. So we're going to have a series of gab fests I'm talking about. But I'm introducing the concept of Shemitah in the gardening.
Hold
And I
up what
say-
you were holding up before.
Yeah,
Bob
that's-
just
that's
mentioned,
that's the
explain what that
Chazon
is.
Shemitah book. I
That's
don't-
great. That's a great idea. I'm actually working with the National Wildlife Federation now on a project that they're piloting, working with congregations to reach out to their members about planting native plants. They're tying it to protecting water quality in this particular program, but people are really excited about gardening now, and that's a way to bring in the bigger picture with the native plants. And I also suggest that once you get them gardening, you can talk to them about farming and agriculture and the climate impacts and the soil, and get them involved in some advocacy, once they're aware of the issues.
I know there's a
and
couple.
composting and planting cover crops and not using pesticides on your lawn, but putting, say, clover that doesn't need help to grow.
Yep.
How the earth can rest and rejuvenate every 7 years.
And check our action. We have an action alert on agriculture and forests,
Will do.
and you can get them to write some letters too.
Yes. Excellent.
I think, Bob, did you want to say something?
I was just going to throw in that a few members of Congregation Kol Ami in White Plains are presenting, like in a few days, to the Board of Trustees of that congregation, joining this new National Wildlife Federation program that
Oh,
you
great.
mentioned. So
That's
we
awesome.
may have the first congregation doing it by the end of this spring.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Naomi, she's the one I work with. She's giving the presentation. Yeah. By the way, I didn't put this in my presentation, but I guess I have to tell you about the new campaign we're doing at my synagogue. So we wanted to get involved with the movement to stop the financing for fossil fuel infrastructure. That's another thing that we can do, is use our money in a better way. So we were working with Green America. If you don't know Green America, you should definitely check it out. They work on all kinds of consumer issues, which a lot of people in synagogues are very interested in. And they have a whole, kit and information about how you can move your money out of basically the big banks all support financing of fossil fuel infrastructure. So you can move your accounts, move your retirement accounts and so on. But the step that they recommend, that's the easiest first step that anyone can take, is to stop using your big bank credit card and switch to a credit card that's socially responsible. So issued by a credit union or a community development bank. So we're doing a campaign in our congregation. It's one of these things where, what everyone does is a drop in the bucket, but it can really add up if you do it as a community. And we have really, it's really picking up momentum. People are very, very open to the idea of doing something positive like this if it's not too hard. And switching credit cards is not too hard. So I recommend people look at that Green America Socially Responsible Credit Cards. Okay, now I'm really curious to know who thinks that they could get their community involved in some advocacy. And if you don't think so, then I want to know why so I can answer your objection. Who's inspired? Okay.
I'll
Okay,
raise a hand for my husband too, Rabbi Ben Newman, who's making dinner for the family.
what are you going to do as your first step, Shoshana?
Oh, what am I gonna do? Well, what comes to mind is my B mitzvah kids, B mitzvah being the gender neutral, bar bat mitzvah B, to each of them as taking on a cause that they care about. And one of my kiddos is taking on climate change. And I need to get back to her about some ways she wants to raise money. So that's one thing. But in terms of advocacy, I'm going to go to a Zoom tonight that Bob just chatted me about to start a Dayenu group in the 17th Congressional District.
Awesome. We just had as part of the Big Bold Jewish Climate Fest, we hosted a session on how secrets of successful advocacy. And one of the speakers, it was a high school student who was recommended, when he had his bar mitzvah, he was wanted to speak about climate change, and his rabbi, Mark Margolius, told him he should go and represent the congregation at Jewish Climate Action Network, New York City. And he's still involved to this day, and he chairs his Green Committee, he's very involved in the Green Committee at his synagogue, and he spoke on our panels. If you want to inspire your high school students, you could show them the recording of our session. He's really terrific.
Please send it.
Yeah, okay, we'll have a follow-up, Marty. Remind me, a follow-up email.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, who else said they're going to take a step? Ellen, what step are you going to take? You have to unmute.
Well, I just actually wrote in the chat that the Jewish Earth Alliance letter writing campaigns, with the templates, the sample letters, and really laying out each issue very simply makes it an easy opportunity to start a letter writing campaign in the congregation. So I think that is a great way to address the systemic issues that we talked about, apart from the institutional change and the personal change and the communal changes, pushing that letter writing and reach out to representatives in Congress. But this is a great first start for people who are new to that.
Yes, thank you very much for the testimonial. And Ellen, I know how busy you are. So another tip I always give people is find someone else to take the lead on that particular project. It's a very, it's so well organized that someone who's not as experienced as you probably could, with some coaching from you, take the lead. So that's another tip that I always like to share with the overwhelmed advocate.
Bob Schloss raised his hand. Bob?
I wanted to suggest a kind of modification as a possibility. So here's the motivation. Congress has a really complicated process for receiving paper mail because of the ricin and other drugs, that were mailed to them like 10 years ago. And the post office is in the process of falling apart. So
yeah. Let me just say, we don't actually send the mail. We don't send the letters through the mail. Just so.
Okay. Anyway, one thing I thought is that if we knew whenever an elected official was going to appear at a JCC or a synagogue, for example, I believe in early January, Congressman Mondaire Jones spoke briefly at the Orangeburg Jewish Center. So I didn't know about that at the time. But if, like, the kids in my synagogue or the adults in my synagogue wrote a bunch of letters and we brought them over and just sent it home with him or the staff person that's accompanying, and especially if we brought along somebody who's shy about speaking or shy about going on the radio or writing a blog post, but it's not too much to ask them to just say, hi, my name is so-and-so. I belong to this congregation. 80 of us wrote letters to you. Here they are.
That's a fantastic
Anyway, so
Yeah,
we have to have a way to know all the elected officials. And of course, this doesn't only apply to the federal level. There are state officials and county. So how would I know when these people are doing public appearances? That's really my question to the group, not to you.
yeah. I just want to say though, showing up when they're doing a presentation or they're in district is really great. Even if you just ask one question about climate change, because, you know, a lot of these public officials, they hear from the Jewish community about a very limited set of issues. And they don't know that we care. I remember one time I went to, when Kristen Gillibrand wrote her book, they had a book, you know, event at UJA. And I raised my hand as soon as they said it was time for questions, because they usually only take 1 or 2 questions. And I asked her a question about climate change in Congress. And she gave, first of all, very informed and excellent response. But I'm sure that everyone else there learned a lot because they were not thinking about climate change. So I really like your idea. I also just want to mention that we don't send the letters through the mail. Originally, we were using Jews in Washington as volunteers to go on the Hill and personally deliver the letters. So you would email the letters and we print them out and go on the Hill. Right now, we can't do that. So what we do is we send them directly to the staffer in the member of Congress office who's responsible for climate change. So we know they get there and we know that they know that where they come from, and that is reinforcing the relationship that we have with the member of Congress. But maybe someone else knows the answer to Bob's question about.
Okay, so you just implied that you know the name of the staffer for Senator Gillibrand and the staffer for Senator Schumer that handles climate.
I'll send them to you. That's what you want to know, right?
I want to know also, as soon as you know, if Congressman Jones has delegated one person to handle that for him. I'd like to know who that is.
Okay.
Mondaire Jones. That's great.
By the way, you can always just call the office and ask, and they'll usually, you know, tell you who it is. But I'll tell you the
It's
one.
only the 3rd week that he's been in office.
He may not have
and
one.
As Judy can tell you in great detail, his district office is still getting themselves organized.
Yeah.
And so is his Washington office. It's okay. It's going to stabilize, but it's not quite there yet.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Now, who's dubious about being able to do advocacy in their community? I want to hear what you have to say. Okay, Deborah, unmute yourself.
You're muted, Deborah.
All right.
Okay. No, now you muted again. You were unmuted, now you're muted. Okay,
There. Good.
good, you got it.
This is my first meeting, and I don't really think that Sinai Free Synagogue has any action in this department, pretty much. So
Yes.
I don't know
yes.
right yet, but I need a little bit of help as to what the best efficient way to start, like one thing that could be effective that I could do.
Has your community done any education about these issues?
No.
Okay, start with that.
As far as I know.
Start with that. We could provide a speaker, but there are a lot of people in your community also, some of them on this Zoom right now, who could come and talk about some of the issues. And also you could ask your rabbi, your clergy, or someone else, in the community to talk about some of the Jewish aspects. And what is Judaism? What can we learn from Judaism about this? I personally give a talk about from Moses to Greta, what we can learn about leadership and climate change. So there's a lot of great connections you can make, and it's good to tack it on to something that your community already does. So actually, one of the great things about Zoom is I had a rabbi invite me a few weeks ago to speak for 15 minutes at the Shabbat service, which it was in Pennsylvania. I mean, never could have done that before, but nowadays you can really go anywhere and do anything.
Right. So
That's great.
so you're saying you would be willing to speak to our congregation?
Yeah, and we have a list of speakers actually on our website, jewishearthalliance.org. If you go down to resources, there's a link there to inspiring speakers. We're all inspiring.
Okay, that sounds like a good place to start.
And Deborah, do email me. I sent you, my email address.
I
maybe we can hook you up with, you're in Mount Vernon, right?
Yes.
Yeah, with someone from the Jewish Climate Action Network of New York. One of the leaders just moved to Riverdale, which is close, so
That's a great idea.
we'll talk. We'll
Okay.
hook you up with somebody.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Who else is dubious? Let's hear. How about some of you who aren't showing yourselves?
Nobody's dubious.
Andrew, you've been there right from the beginning. Do you have something to say? Or Karen? Oh, Andrew, good. You're unmuting yourself. I like that. What do you have to say, Andrew?
Well, I was the one who wanted us to do a push for community solar, because with Greenberg, we just had a presentation 2 weeks ago from Dandelion for geothermal and West Sustainable Westchester. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to do another one with NYSERDA to see what all the tax programs the federal government's providing. So that's what I'm interested in, maybe how we can do, group bulk purchase buying, or, to get multiple synagogues together, just to accelerate the process.
That's a great idea. Anybody else from
Great.
another synagogue interested in working with Andrew, or did you already connect in the chat? Put a note in the chat to Andrew if you're interested in working together. And I'd be happy to, send you some pictures and stuff from our congregation, maybe to get you started. You can show that Jews are already doing it.
That's good.
Great, yes.
Let's see, what about, yeah,
What is that?
Sorry, it's,
Well, it's 7 o'clock. We should wind
That
up.
was my bat mitzvah student. Someone clicked on this. She made it 5 minutes. So if you don't want to watch the 28-minute one, you can get the gist in 5
The
minutes. from
longer
Aya's
one,
video.
the shorter one.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to thank Mirala very, very much. This has been super, super helpful. Thank you. Yes, indeed. And everybody remember March 2nd, please invite everybody you know to come. Thank you all.
can you copy the chat before you close the meeting?
Yeah, I don't, Pam, would you do that? I have no idea how to do that. I was just
Yes.
trying to, and I don't know how to do it, but
We
I'm sure
save,
Pam does.
we save the chat text, so I
Okay.
can send that to you.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you so
Great.
much. Great to meet all of you.
Thank you
Bye.
all.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Can someone stay on just to tell me what's March 2nd? Because I was late.
Oh, yes, I'll explain it to you. I'll stay on. March 2nd is our next meeting, and we're going to have Rabbi Ellen Bernstein, who wrote.
Oh, great. Mhm.
Yeah, so she's going to do a little bit of Jewish teaching, and then she's going to talk about, obviously, greening your Seder, and she's going to focus it on personal Seders, congregational Seders, and community
Wonderful.
Seders. So we've opened it up to all congregant members and friends and whatever. If we have 200 people on the Zoom,
Oh,
that would be
great.
great. So what came in the email, and it'll be in the council newsletter, and you'll get another one and another one probably, because we're going to make sure that you have the flyer, which has a link to register and a link to get her Haggadah if you want it.
I have it. Yep.
Yeah, so please do invite all your congregants. They need to have the flyer so they
Great.
can register. Okay,
And that's March 2nd.
March 2nd at 6 o'clock,
At what time?
6 p.m.
Okay.
Same as this one.
Thank you so much. Yep.
Okay,
Fabulous.
great, great. Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.